The Brij Bhavan Palace stands tall. It is a majestic structure. It overlooks the serene waters of the Gomti River. The palace has been transformed into a heritage hotel. It welcomes guests from all corners of the world. They come seeking a taste of regal history. They find much more. The palace holds a secret. It is a chilling tale of tragedy and the supernatural. The palace whispers of a time gone by. It speaks of Maharajas and their lavish lifestyles. Yet, beneath the veneer of opulence lies a darkness. It is a haunting presence. It sends shivers down the spines of those who dare to enter. The air is heavy with unspoken stories. The walls seem to hold their breath, guarding their secrets closely. The palace is a labyrinth of corridors and chambers. Each one seems to hold remnants of the past. Intricate carvings and faded portraits adorn the walls. They are a constant reminder of the palace's former glory. But it is the silence that is most unsettling. It is broken only by the creaking of floorboards and the distant echoes of a forgotten time. The Brij Bhavan Palace is a place of contrasts. It is where grandeur meets gloom. It is where history collides with the supernatural. It is a place where the past refuses to die. It is a place where the living walk among the shadows of the dead. The year 1857, a year that would forever alter the course of Indian history. A year etched in the annals of Indian history, remembered for its profound impact and the seismic shifts it caused. It was the year of the Sepoy Mutiny, also known as the First War of Indian Independence. A wave of rebellion swept across northern India, igniting a fierce struggle against colonial rule. It threatened the very foundations of British rule, shaking the empire to its core. In the heart of this turmoil lay the kingdom of Kota, a region rich in history and culture. It was here, within the walls of the majestic Brij Bhavan Palace, that a tale of tragedy and valour unfolded. Major Charles Burton was the British resident, a man tasked with maintaining order amidst the chaos. He was a man of duty and honour, respected by his peers and feared by his enemies. Yet he found himself facing an impossible situation, one that tested his resolve and courage. The sepoys under his command had risen up in revolt, driven by a deep-seated anger and a desire for freedom. They were fueled by anger and resentment against their colonial masters, their spirits unyielding and their determination fierce. The palace, once a symbol of peace and prosperity, became a battleground, its halls echoing with the sounds of conflict. The rebels, filled with rage and a thirst for justice, stormed the palace gates with an unstoppable force. They were determined to overthrow the British, to reclaim their land and their dignity. Major Burton, along with his two sons, fought bravely, their hearts steeled by a sense of duty and honour. They defended their position against overwhelming odds, their courage unwavering even in the face of certain defeat. But their valiant efforts were in vain as the sheer number of rebels overwhelmed them. The palace walls echoed with the sounds of battle, a cacophony of clashing steel and desperate cries. And with those sounds the fate of the Burtons was sealed, their lives claimed by the relentless tide of rebellion. The mutiny was eventually quelled, the rebellion crushed under the might of the British forces. But the victory came at a heavy price, the cost of countless lives and the scars of a nation. Major Burton and his sons were slain within the palace walls, their sacrifice a sombre testament to the brutality of war. Their blood stained the marble floors, a grim reminder of the horrors that had transpired within those once hallowed halls. The palace, once a symbol of princely grandeur, was now a haunted tomb, its grandeur overshadowed by the tragedy of that fateful year. It was forever marked by the tragedy of 1857, a silent witness to the bloodshed and the indomitable spirit of those who fought. In the aftermath of the mutiny, An eerie silence fell upon Brij Bhavan. The once bustling palace, filled with the sounds of laughter, conversation, and the clinking of glasses, now stood in stark contrast to its former self. It was the silence of death and despair, a silence that seemed to seep into the very stones of the building. But it was not an empty silence. It was a silence that carried with it the weight of countless untold stories and unfinished business. It was a silence pregnant with unease, as if the air itself was thick with the presence of those who had once walked these halls. It was as if the very walls themselves were haunted by the spirits of those who had perished within them. The cracks in the walls seemed to whisper secrets, and the shadows danced with a life of their own. And among those restless souls, one stood out. A figure whose presence was felt more strongly than any other. Major Charles Burton, the fallen British resident. His story was one of bravery and tragedy, a tale that had become intertwined with the very fabric of Brij Bhavan. The stories began slowly, whispers among the staff, tales told in hushed tones, unexplained noises in the dead of night. The sound of footsteps where no one should be walking, footsteps echoing down empty corridors as if someone was pacing, lost in thought, doors slamming shut on their own, objects moving mysteriously as if guided by an unseen hand. A cold breeze, carrying the scent of sandalwood and gunpowder, would suddenly sweep through the palace. It was a scent that seemed to belong to another time, another era, and then the sightings began. Guests and staff alike reported seeing a tall, distinguished figure in British colonial attire. He would appear at the end of hallways or in the shadows of the palace gardens, always just out of reach. His presence was unmistakable, a reminder of a bygone era. He would stand silently, watching, as if waiting for something or someone. His face, though obscured by time and the gloom, seemed etched with sadness and a profound sense of longing. It was a face that spoke of loss and regret. Some claimed to have seen him pacing restlessly in the dead of night. His figure, tall and imposing, moved with a sense of purpose. His heavy boots striking the marble floors with a ghostly tread. The sound echoed through the empty halls, a reminder of his presence. Others spoke of hearing his voice, a deep, mournful baritone calling out in the darkness. It was a voice filled with sorrow and longing. The voice would echo through the halls, a haunting melody that sent chills down the spine of anyone who heard it. The staff, accustomed to the palace's eerie atmosphere, had their own tales to tell. They spoke of the Major's unwavering attachment to the palace. They spoke of how he seemed unable to leave the site of his demise. His spirit, they said, was forever bound to Brij Bhavan. How he seemed unable to leave the site of his demise. His spirit, they said, was forever bound to the place of his death. They said that his spirit, forever bound to the place of his death, wandered the halls of Brij Bhavan, seeking solace perhaps, or perhaps still fighting the ghosts of his past. Seeking solace perhaps, or perhaps still fighting the ghosts of his past. The Major's story had become a part of the palace's legend, a tale that would be told for generations to come. As the years turned into decades, the tales of Brij Bhavan's resident ghost continued to circulate. The stories, passed down from generation to generation, grew richer with each retelling, adding layers of intrigue and fear. What was once whispered in hushed tones among the staff became local legend. The ghostly figure of Major Burton, a British officer who met a tragic end, became a central figure in these tales. Visitors to the palace, intrigued by the stories, came seeking a glimpse of the spectral Major. They wandered the dimly lit hallways, hoping to catch a fleeting shadow or hear a disembodied voice. Some dismissed the tales as mere superstition, a product of overactive imaginations and the eerie atmosphere of the old palace. Others, however, were not so sure. They felt an inexplicable unease, a sense that the stories might hold a kernel of truth. For them, the palace held an undeniable air of mystery. Guests reported strange occurrences in their rooms, lights flickering inexplicably, the temperature dropping suddenly as if an unseen presence had entered the room. The distinct feeling of being watched, a sensation that sent shivers down their spines. The distinct feeling of being watched. It was as if unseen eyes followed their every move, observing them from the shadows. Some even claimed to have felt a ghostly presence beside their beds at night. They described the sensation of a cold touch on their skin, a whisper of breath against their ears, as if the Major himself was standing beside them. A cold touch on their skin, a whisper of breath against their ears. These experiences left them shaken, questioning the boundaries between the living and the dead. One particular wing of the palace, where Major Burton and his sons had met their tragic end, became notorious for its paranormal activity. The air in this wing seemed heavier, charged with an unseen energy. Guests who dared to stay there spoke of disembodied voices, phantom footsteps, and the feeling of an unseen presence. The sounds of footsteps echoing in the empty hallways, voices whispering in the dark, all added to the eerie ambience. Some even claimed to have seen apparitions of the Major's sons, their youthful faces forever frozen in expressions of terror. These sightings were rare, but left an indelible mark on those who witnessed them. The staff, no longer able to ignore the growing number of unsettling incidents, began to take precautions. They hoped to appease the restless spirits and bring some peace to the haunted palace. They would leave a glass of water and a plate of biscuits in the Major's former room each night. This ritual, performed with a mix of fear and reverence, was their way of acknowledging the presence of the supernatural. It was a gesture of respect, an attempt to appease the restless spirit. The offerings were simple, yet they carried a profound significance for those who left them. Whether these offerings brought any peace to the Major's soul, no one could say for sure. The staff continued their nightly rituals, hoping that their efforts would be enough to calm the spirits. But the strange occurrences persisted, cementing Brij Bhavan's reputation as one of the most haunted places in India. The palace, with its rich history and ghostly tales, remained a place where the line between the living and the dead seemed to blur.